Good day, folks. Continuing on the Chinese, our biggest threat, while our prime ministers and everybody else is dipping themselves in the Ganges, unclean Ganges, basically. I'm not trying to prove what he's dipping into Ganges that had these lakhs of dead bodies floating during COVID. But hey, while he's doing that, the Chinese threat ain't going away. And as I said, continuing along that vein, let's just see. One of the books that I read much earlier was by Ashley Tellis, and this is the book, China's Grand Strategy. For those who have not read this and want to understand China, this is absolutely one of the most fabulous books I've read, and there's nothing in India or Indian consciousness or analysts that have even come close to this to predict anything about China. But we've always been narrow focused, as far as that is concerned, right? So here's the thing, right? He rightly pointed out that in 2024-20 that China will break out in 2024-25. But I guess when he wrote this book, he hadn't taken into account a man like Xi and his desire for total control. And why did Xi break out so early? Now with what I read out yesterday, China is not all that it's made out to be. Right? And I think there is a fear in the CCP that if they don't take control of their citizens and their minds, the CCP will be in trouble. Quote unquote, China will not be in trouble. The CCP will be in trouble, and that is their biggest fear. The other thing that you learn from this book is that every so many years, China's weakest links have always been the periphery. It goes, extends, and suddenly shrinks because the periphery starts to fall out, and that's their biggest fear. And that's why when we talk about Mao's palm and five fingers, in that periphery he includes Arunachal Pradesh, Nepal, Ladakh, Sikkim, and Bhutan. Becomes very critical. On the other side is Xinjiang and Outer Mongolia, and so on and so forth. And when I say this, as Raja Mohan also says, Beijing's blunder. Xi Jinping's aggressive regional policies are dividing many countries that were hopeful of deeper ties with China towards the US. He says, one of the many consequences of China's assertive posture in Asia has been the emergence of a geopolitical coalition to limit the prospects of Beijing's regional dominance. Two new coalitions that have got a lot of political attention are the quadrilateral framework involving Australia, India, Japan, US, and the AUKUS, which brings together Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Two big factors are behind China's rethinking. One was the surprising emergence of American domestic political consensus on challenging China. In Asia, the Biden administration moved quickly to strengthen the traditional security ties with its allies in Northeast Asia, Japan and South Korea. It also elevated the Quad to the leaders level within weeks after Biden took charge and had a physical summit in Washington 6 months later. Biden also decided on an early summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin that took place in Geneva at the end of his European tour. While the idea of America separating Russia from China continues to look fanciful, Washington now recognizes the importance of keeping channels open to Moscow. It has only after getting his ducks in a row that Biden had the first summit with Xi. Beijing's ties with Moscow have never been as close as they are. China also has strong alliance-like relations with North Korea and Pakistan. But look, here this is very important for everybody. But there can be little comparison, though, between the kind of strength that American allies bring to the table with those of Chinese partners. Remember this. China has been confident, at least until now, that it can tempt the US into a bilateral deal in the name of a shared great power interest and joint management of the world. But Chinese policies have driven the US towards an unanticipated internal consensus on containing Beijing. It's the right time for India, that's what I say. Making a friendly America into an enemy prematurely could go down as one of Xi Jinping's egregious strategic errors. For all claims about America's decline, history points to the dangers of underestimating US capacity for self-renewal and the will to retain its primacy. China's aggressive policies have not brought the political acquiescence that Beijing expected from all its neighbors. In fact, it has had opposite effect with key neighbors. China which never stops to emphasize its own nationalism, appears to have underestimated the depth of similar sentiments in other Asian states. In the past, Asian nationalism was easily mobilized against the US and the West. Today, it's driving many of China's neighbors into the US camp. It is America and not China that today talks about the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Asian nations. And folks, like I said, he's come out up, he's unsheathed his sword 3 to 4 years too early. Now he's up a creek without a paddle, economically and internally. Cheers. Besides the Beijing blunder I spoke to you about, there are a number of banners that are running that you guys ought to look at, seeing how the world stacked up, whether it's the European Union and trade with China and its suspicions, how Australia is reacting to what's happening in Solomon Island, where the fight, but the internal disturbance is because of the derecognition of Taiwan by Fiji, whether it is, of course, India, whether what is happening in Sri Lanka, the whole bit, right? The whole thing is getting stacked against the crew of Erdogan is anyway bankrupt, as you can say. The lira is going down the chute. Putin really doesn't have much to show for him except muscle and a naked torso, which our Prime Minister unfortunately didn't show when he was dipping in the Ganges. But here's the deal. Army IAF hold joint drills in Ladakh amid China face-off. Military talks are unlikely to result in a breakthrough, and only higher intervention can show the way to resolving the 18-month-old border crisis, experts have said. In a report submitted to the Congress on November 3rd, the US Department of Defense and Beijing said Beijing was taking incremental and tactical actions to press its claim that the LAC, despite participating in talks to resolve the crisis. Forget talking, right? The talks between Xi and Biden went nowhere because Xi ain't going to stop his ways. Biden made his intent fairly clear. China ties passing through bad patch, says Jay Shankar. Is he kidding me? They're in deep dive. I'm not sure why he gave in to the Kalashes. Why do we think that talking gets us anywhere, right? LAC open to salami slicing by China due to grazing curbs. There's slimy slicing right under our nose. Irresponsible nations twisting definition of sea law, says Rajnath. But Rajnath, what are you doing about it, right? You don't even name these guys. You should name them. India takes up LAC infra build up by China's PLA. Where is that going to go? Take up, keep taking it up. China began work on LAC long before standoff. They've been prepared for this for a long time. And just remember, again Russia, again Sergei Lavrov. He gave us false assurances that this build up in the Galwan Valley was not targeting India. It was just an exercise. Please, let's have a full disclosure on that. India and China agree to hold fresh military level talks on LAC. Raw, more evidence of PLA building villages near Indian-Bhutan borders, right? As if we needed any proof, buddy. The guy, Arunachal guys, the ministers, the part of this government have been telling them. Keeping close watch on Chinese activities in Indian Ocean region. Keeping close eyes ain't going to do much, right? India to host Central Asian foreign ministers on 18th and 19th. That's important. This is a circle around China, right? China developer Sunshine defaults on 170 million bonds. You can see where they are going. Their economy is in deep trouble. China suspends SL solar plant after India protests. Chinese firm inks deal with Maldives. The pressure we put on Sri Lanka needs to be put on Maldives too, right? Important. Then we have this. Uganda loses key airport to China lenders after loan default. This is happening everywhere, though. China came running and Ugandan corruption came to the fore. But hey, what do we have here? With West in mind, Xi and Putin set to meet virtually. Hey, everybody's worried. Everybody's worried. They're meeting virtually. Why virtually? You got to worry about this. Putin came to India physically. Then why isn't he going to his closest bum chum physically? Because Xi is worried. Xi is worried. Oh, Putin doesn't think it's worth it. China, Russia decry US democracy meet. China, Russia blast US move on diplomatic boycott on Olympics. China slams US democracy before Biden summit. And this is the real problem. And you know, we are also internally suffering a little bit, right? November retail inflation at 3-month high. We got to get our economy in control. But what was really humming was Chak De Fate India, a Miss Universe after 21 years. And guess who took credit for it? Modi Bhai Sahab. PM talks of Punjab, Bengal, Kashi link. Hey, let's talk about Kashi-China link, folks. Let's talk about China-Kashi link. What about this? Terrorists attack police bus in J&K, 2 cops killed, 14 injured. Okay, this is while China is banging on our door, salami slicing, and this is what we got. BJP holds events across India to mark Kashi corridors unveiling. And you know, I thought that was, I could understand this gentleman standing in an orange saffron dripping wet. Hey, take off your top like Putin, man. Show us your chest. PM Modi opens Kashi Vishwanath corridor. Do we care? No, I care more about China, slug, building a corridor, not Kashi corridor. Top BJP leaders pray at temples across the country. They're praying, please get us back to power, folks. Or at least pray that China doesn't hog us all up by now, right? For every Aurangzeb, there's been a Shivaji Modi in Kashi. Bihar candidate assaults makes Dalit lick spit. Now this is our religion. Let's go out there, Mr. Prime Minister Rajnath Singh, worry about China, not waste our time on this Kashi corridor which is still not built. Still not built. So this conversation happened between Biden and Xi. China goes 2-2 against US and talks with signal its arrival as an equal. Well, I guess it got showed its way because as things continued, you have this, the chairman of everything cements his control over China. In the last 9 years, Xi has led a more globally assertive China involving aggressive posturing on Taiwan, maritime disputes in the South China Sea, and serious tensions with India on the boundary dispute. No explanation has been offered yet why President Xi hasn't left China since his return from Myanmar on January 18, 2020. As if on cue, the country itself remains somewhat isolated with international travel severely restricted. But in China, you can't question the chairman of everything who has all the answers. And that's why she's not going there. Leadership over PLA was obviously lacking for a while, says CPC. And this is an article to blame what happened, the standoff against India and Galwan. In US and China, 22/3 of wealth held by richest 10% households gives a problem for China, especially since all these houses are Xi's acolytes. And when Joe speaks to Xi, what really happened? The DC-Beijing rivalry is structural. The virtual conversation did not change that. Like I said, it ain't going to change that. The reality of US-China dialogue. He says, this is Harsh Pant. The Chinese president lobbed the ball back into the US court by attributing tensions around Taiwan to attempts by Taiwan authorities to look for US support for their independence agenda, as well as the intention of some Americans to use Taiwan to contain China. He says, there are many in India who continue to advise India to tread cautiously as they relive old debates on Chimerica and G2. But reality has moved far beyond what those terms were seeking to achieve. This is a unique moment in contemporary geopolitics, and India should remain alive to the needs of being nimble enough to adapt quickly to the changing external environment. Okay, will the US reset ties with China and Pakistan? He says, arguably China and Pakistan have also done more to undermine US strategic interests over the past 2 decades than any other countries. Now this is something US is not going to forget. Today Pakistan's appeal for US assistance and attention are more likely to fall upon deaf ears in Washington. Why can't Islamabad turn to its iron brother China for help? That's the kind of call that's getting it. But at least in the near future, the prospects for India-US strategic cooperation remain brighter to India's east than to the west. Then, like I said, ramping up, man. To counter China, Austin vows boost alliances with others in the region. Indonesia, Bilkin is visiting Indonesia. New Zealand has finally jumped on board. New Zealand Defense Forces warn of rising China threat to Indo-Pacific. Japan vows to set up defense amid China and NK threats. Kishida vows to counter China North Korea threat. So that's what previously I pointed out. What China had hoped for kowtowing from all of us has suddenly unsheathed the nationalism in all the countries. US announces boycott of Beijing Winter Olympics, protesting rights atrocities. US officials to boycott Beijing Olympics. Eye on China, US to upgrade and expand bases in Guam and OZ. Australia, UK, Canada join US in diplomatic boycott on Beijing Olympics. Other very similar move. China criticizes US democracy ahead of Biden's summit. Review, and in India, we are reviewing of China trade via security prism, says Foreign Secretary, and that should always happen. And you got to worry because it's all one-sided, because they don't they don't import anything for us. They keep putting in all kinds of barriers. Food exports fret over registration in China. Mandates. So basically, China keeps throwing up all these walls in front of Indian exports. Hey, They keep cutting their own feet. They don't have enough food. Boy, folks, just remember, they don't have enough food internally, folks. We are far better placed as far as that is concerned. Jai Hind.